Sorry about that, everyone. It's going to have to be 2 videos, I guess. I ran out of storage and had to delete some stuff. So example number 4 is the angulation changed vertical or horizontal. Like we said, the zygomatic process went up, and we know that is a buccal landmark. And so if it went up, it was changed in a vertical direction. In which direction does the occlusal surface of the impacted tooth face? So in this first film, we don't see any roots at all. And then in the second, we can start to see the apex of the root. So that means that the apex of the root went up, just like the zygomatic process went up. So that means that must be buccal. And so the crown, the direction of the occlusal surface, is facing lingual. Okay, so that's that first sheet. I hope that clears that one up. And then let's take this one and go through this next one here. So is the cusp of number 2 buccal or lingual? So what we want to do is we want to take our most straight on image first. We want to determine which way the beam went. So we want to pick one as our baseline. Usually you pick your most straight on. And so if we look at what's happening here, we look and we can see that certain landmarks are kind of leaning more distally. And so anything that's leaning more distally, we can assume is a buccal, and that's the way that the well, we don't assume it, but we know that roots tend to lean toward the direction of the beam. And then this, which is generally our palatal root, seems to be going in the opposite direction, so that sort of confirms it. Our palatal root sort of going opposite of these two roots here, and then the elongation of the buccal cusps tends to be leaning toward the distal as well. And then we can see sort of a severe opposite direction of what we now can assume are the lingual cusps. So the beam is going distal, and these roots, I'll kind of put an arrow, just these roots are sort of going distal. This root is sort of going distal. We can see the angulation of our buccal cusps is sort of going distal. And so these cusps here and here are showing far more of a lingual leaning. So then we would say that number 2 is lingual. Is the root labeled number 3 buccal or lingual? So that looks like it's leaning more in a distal direction. So this would be buccal. Where is the round object located? So here's the round object starts out here, and it goes to the opposite side of the lingual palatal root. So that tells me it's leaning in a distal direction. The beam is going distal, so it must be buccal. In which corner of the molar is the overhanging restoration? This is tricky because it totally looks like it's lingual, right? Because if we look at here and here, we go, oh, it's lingual. But look at how far it moved in the distal direction, just like everything else that is buccal, right? So it's distal buccal. All right, which direction is the horizontal angulation changed in passing from radiograph A to radiograph B? Well, if we look at radiograph B, it's more straight on. It's more straight on, and then everything went kind of distal. Everything moved sort of in a distal orientation. So from A, so if it went distal from B to A, it must have gone mesial from A to B. So I know that I might have said that too fast, but they want to know how the angulation changed from this radiograph to this one. But sometimes that can be hard if things are already kind of tilted. So if you take your most straight on shot and compare it to the next one, sometimes that can help you. But basically everything was like this. If you look at my hands, everything was kind of like this, and then it moved straight on from A to B. So it moved from distal to mesial to be a more straight on shot. So then the answer here would be mesial. Whereas the crown of the impacted tooth, so when everything went from distal to more mesial, the crown moved in a distal direction. So it went from in front of the palatal root to over the palatal root. So that means it went the opposite of the beam, so it must be lingual. Where does the square, this one was really challenging. And so basically if you look at these series of radiographs, it's the anterior, it's the canine, and it's the molar, or actually it's the premolar. So it's the central, canine, premolar. So every shot, the beam is going more and more mesial. So the beam is going mesial for this series of images. So then you look and see how the objects moved for each one of these. So this seems to go a slightly more distal direction, or if you think about the angulation of the beam in a vertical angulation, the roots all got a little bit longer here. Like here's I think this is actually a mandibular. You know why I think this is so confusing? This is just dawning on me. But these are mandibular central incisors, and this is showing it like they're maxillary. So sorry to be really confusing, but I think it's actually supposed to look like this. These are mandibular central incisors, a canine shot on the mandible, and then a molar shot on the mandible. And I think that's what's adding to the confusion of that. But even still, central, canine, premolar, it's still going mesial. So it still applies, it's just weird to look at. So anyways, this one, the square seems to move in a slightly opposite direction. So this is more lingual. In which direction does the hooked root? So here's the hooked root straight on. In the next shot, it goes basically it goes mesial, and the beam is going mesial. So it must be buccal. Hope that is clear. So this is going in this direction, and we know that the beam in all of these is going slightly more mesial. That's how it would, if you're turning your tube head, if you're turning your beam for each of these progressive shots, you know you're coming a little bit more mesial. And then on which surface of the crown is the filling located? So the filling started out here, it ended up going a little bit more this way, so this must be lingual. Okay, and then in which radiograph is the beam in a more upward direction? This one, the roots are elongated, so it must be B, because the roots are longer in B. Where does the crown of the impacted canine lie? Well, when the beam went up, this crown moved down. The beam went up, and this crown moved down. So then this must be lingual. And then where's the CEJ? The CEJ started out right here, and then the CEJ moved up, and the beam moved up, so the CEJ must be buccal. Last one, where does the mandibular canal lie relative to the apices? The external oblique ridge moved down from this shot. It moved down. And we know that's a buccal landmark, so we know that the beam must have moved down. And then the canal also moved down from this shot to this shot. So we know that it is also oriented more buccal. All right, I hope that helps a little bit. If you compare that to what you did when you get your worksheet back, hopefully that kind of clarifies the thinking process. Thanks, guys.